Welcome back. Campaign manager for the Democratic Republic of Congo, opposition presidential candidate, has charged that the ruling coalition might be behind a blaze at the Election Commission warehouse that destroyed thousands of voting machines and ballot boxes that were due to be used in the country's long-delayed December 23rd presidential election. Pierre Lumbi has rejected accusations that the opposition might be behind the blaze, saying even though the introduction of the untested tablet-like voting machines for the election has been widely opposed by opposition candidates, they did not call for its destruction.
How can they tell that they are not the ones who are behind this incident? Who organized it? So they could have a pretext not to go to the polls. How can they tell that they didn't realize that there's so much enthusiasm around Martin Fayulu, that even their meant to cheat machine, they actually couldn't cheat that much. The enthusiasm for Martin Fayulu is so great, they now need parades.
Mr. Lumbi says despite their known opposition to these electronic devices, they would not have wished for such a fire to take place.
We do have a strong position against the voting machines, position which is known to everyone, but no one ever called for destroying the machines.
He adds that the opposition wants the election to go ahead as planned despite this tragedy.
But we still want the election to happen. We won't accept any delay. On December 23, we expect the election to happen.
Some ordinary residents also do point a finger at the ruling party for the blaze.
Yesterday's fire started in a place which is high under security, which is very well secured. There is even a military camp near around that place. How can one explain that in such a place such a fire can start just like this? I really don't believe this is possible. There have been a lot of maneuver around the organization of this election for quite some time now. I start to believe that actually there won't be any election on December 23rd.
And some remain optimistic. Despite the blaze, blame for destroying 80% of voting material marked for the Kinshasa district.
Yes, we are still convinced that the election will happen. The Electoral Commission confirmed that the election will be held, and no matter what incident happens, this is why we are certain the election will happen.
President Joseph Kabila refused to leave office at the end of his second mandate in 2016 and only reluctantly agreed not to stand in the forthcoming election. The constitution of the DRC limits presidents to 2 consecutive terms. The vote has already been delayed by 2 years due to what authorities said were logistical challenges, but the opposition said were obstacles put in place out of Kabila's reluctance to relinquish power. Democratic Republic of Congo's National Electoral Commission, CENI, said in a statement the fire had destroyed 8,000 of 10,368 voting machines due to be used in the capital Kinshasa, but said the election would go ahead as scheduled. CENI did not say who it believed to be responsible for the fire, but the ruling coalition and leading opposition candidates immediately traded accusations of blame.
Meanwhile, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has condemned violence targeting the opposition by the DRC security forces. This just days before a vote marred by an increasingly tense campaign. Michelle Bachelet called on the authorities in Kinshasa to ensure that the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, essential conditions for credible elections, are fully protected.
United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, on Friday expressed deep concern at violence against opposition rallies this week in at least 3 provinces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo ahead of the December 23 polls. Bachelet called on the authorities to ensure that these incidents are promptly investigated and that the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, essential conditions for credible elections, are fully protected. Tensions are rising in the vast, chronically unstable country ahead of the December 23rd election, when voters will choose a successor to incumbent President Joseph Kabila. On Thursday, a teenager was shot dead in the central Kasai region as party faithful gathered ahead of a rally by Felix Tshisekedi of the UDPS, one of the leading opposition candidates. And 5 other opposition supporters were shot dead earlier in the week as they gathered to welcome rival opposition candidate Martin Fayulu as he campaigned in the southeast. Bashele also expressed alarm at reports of armed groups' interference with election campaigning. There have been threats against supporters of political parties, notably the presidential majority, particularly in North and South Kivu.
For a deeper look into the DRC, we are now joined via Skype by Aime Zonveni, who is the editor of the Kinshasa Times, an online newsletter in the DRC. Aime, thank you so much for joining us on The Globe, and a very good evening. Now, it's a blame game. Opposition pointing the finger at the ruling party and the ruling party doing the same. What's your take on this and exactly what's happening on the ground in the DRC?
Well, as you've mentioned, now there's this trade of accusations between the opposition on the one hand and the regime on the other. As recently as yesterday, the ruling coalition, which is the FCC, has indicated that this fire was to be blamed on Martin Fayulu's coalition. And today, the coalition has said that they were not very much keen to go as far as destroying the electronic voting machines. So they also say that this could be a move by the regime to try and derail the electoral process, which is now verging on its culmination on the 23rd. So the trade of accusation is happening between the regime and the opposition.
Now, Aime, with regards to the voting machines that were destroyed, there's been a call out in the DRC where they will be recalling voting machines from other areas for their use on the 23rd of December, which is next week Sunday. With regards to that, the opposition has stated that they did not call for any voting material to be destroyed. Now, the ruling party has come out and said, this is what's going to happen. They have enough machines. Are there enough voting machines for elections to take place?
Now, based on what the chair of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Corneille Nanga, has said in a statement issued yesterday, he has indicated that the destroyed materials were only representing 3% of the total and that they were due to be used in Kinshasa, which means 97% of the electoral materials have already been deployed across the country, and the 3% could be redeployed from other parts of the countries that are nearer to Kinshasa. And it is believed that CENI has made some provisions to have at least extra materials that would be used in the event maybe some do not function properly. And these extra electronic voting machines could be used to cover the 8,000 that were destroyed in the fire.
Now, Aime, in terms of what's happening, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, calling for free and fair elections and ensuring that the rights to freedom of expression and peaceful assembly, which are essential conditions for credible elections, are fully protected. Opposition presidential candidates have not been able to electioneer in the different provinces, whereas the ruling party's candidate has been able to access all the different provinces to campaign and continue with his campaign trail. What's the result? What's happening exactly on the ground? We saw earlier in the week with one of the candidates not being able to address his voting pool at a stadium. And this seemingly is the trend with other campaigners as well, with presidential candidates.
Yes, the opposition has been quite vocal by saying that it's being prevented. We're talking about mainly Martin Fayulu and Felix Tshisekedi, who are the two leading opposition figures. They seem to be meeting some challenges to properly conduct their campaign across the country, and they have been quite worried about that, calling on the regime and calling on the international community to take appropriate measures so that we might have a level playing field for each and every candidate to campaign without any hindrance.
Now, let's look at the issue of voter material, which was, gone ablaze in the fire that happened yesterday. There was reports or accusations of being a sabotage, and the reaction from, authorities, the fire department, and in terms of the distance between where the fire department is and where the warehouse is. We had somebody who went into detail at explaining exactly the positioning of everything and how the reaction was very slow. What's your take on that, and what's the reaction from the governing party with regards to those accusations?
Well, with regard to the accusation, it is quite striking to see that the warehouse in question happens to be a few meters from one of the military bases in Kinshasa, and also quite close to another logistics base, which is also part of the army. And actually, it happens to sit on an avenue called the Avenue of the Armed Forces. So it is one of the areas in Kinshasa which should be quite secure and quite safe. This is what is leading many critics to believe that no one would venture in such a very high security and highly militarized area to try and start a fire. But on the other hand, these also are very old infrastructures, and the possibility of a fire starting cannot be ruled. That's why many believe that on the one hand, it could be a sabotage, which the government and the ruling coalition has sternly denied by saying that this could trading acquisitions, this could be a move by the opposition, namely Martin Fayulu's camp, who is adamantly opposing the use of electronic voting machines.
What's the reaction on the ground? What are the Congolese people who are expected to vote on the 23rd of December saying with regards to the fire that took place yesterday?
People are very much, some are quite doubtful now, saying that maybe due to this fire, which we must say only affected, according to the Electoral Commission's, only 3% of materials. So many still maintain that they want to go and cast their ballots on the 23rd of December, while another group of people, another group demographic, believe that it is now getting quite unlikely that the elections will be held on the 23rd. So there is this split of views between those that believe that regardless of this incident, elections will still be held, while others believe that this is indicative of the fact that maybe the country is not ready for polls.
With the calls from the opposition coalition candidate and Philip Tshisekedi stating that they're not able to do their campaigning freely and fairly, the reaction from the ruling governing party, what's their reaction? And in terms of their candidate, how is it possible for their candidate to be able to access any area within the DRC, whereas the other opposition presidential candidates are not able to do the same? What is the reasoning behind that?
It is quite difficult to tell, but what is being observed on the ground is that a number of candidates from the oppositions are not able to freely circulate and do the campaign. No statement, nothing whatsoever was so far said by the regime. So it is still being observed on the ground that there is this sort of like imbalance between, on the one hand, the opposition, and on the other, the regime's coalition.
Let's look forward to the 23rd of December. Let's speak about the process from now up until then. When does the campaigning come to an end for presidential candidates? When are they supposed to stop campaigning and then wait for the voting to take place and the process thereafter?
It should take, the end of the campaign is officially a day to the elections, which should be the 22nd of December. That's when all candidates, regardless of camp, should put an end to their campaign. And then their various witnesses will have, those that were accredited will have to be deployed in the various polling stations. And then come the 23rd, the Congolese people in there and thousands will have to go and cast their ballots, hopefully.
And the counting process thereafter, when the voting or polling stations close, and the counting process beginning to the finality to then get the results of the voting that takes place in the DRC?
Well, the electronic voting machines will immediately, upon casting of ballots, print the voting ballots as have been cast. And immediately the tabulation will have to be done at the respective polling stations. And the chairperson of the Electoral Commission has indicated that he will be able 84 hours later, maybe 2 days after the 23rd, we should be able to know who has emerged victorious from the elections. Now, it is believed that the electronic machines will also be doing a parallel computation, while in the various polling stations, ballots that are cast will be manually counted to make sure that they are tabulated and that no rigging has happened.
Now, there's also been reports, just going back to the issue of the voting machines, the fact that they'll be very easy to manipulate. This is what has come out from from the opposition candidates, stating that manipulating those machines will be a lot easier than manual voting. What's your take on the reaction from government stating that there is no such thing as manipulation, the ability to manipulate those machines? What's your take? And the Electoral Commission, what have they come out and stated with regards to those voting machines?
Well, according to what the SENI, which is the Electoral Commission, has indicated, they said that these machines are simply printing machines. They will be used to print out ballot after people have cast the ballot, after people have selected which candidates they have elected. And according to SENI, this will be a way to save costs, to cut costs, because we're talking about an electorate that is which is approximately 40 million people big. And SENI and the government thought that the easiest way to cut costs would be to use those electronic printing machines. So SENI believes they are mere printers, no possibility of manipulating them. The oppositions, on the other hand, believe that these being computers, they could be given instructions to appropriately benefit the regime. And that's why, especially Martin Fayulu's camp, has been quite adamant and said that these machines should absolutely be removed and we should go back to the traditional way of manually counting ballots and manually casting ballots so that we ensure that no rigging happens.
Aime, very quickly, just in wrapping up, President of the DRC, Joseph Kabila, has come out and stated to the media the fact that he will be stepping down after the voting has taken place, after electioneering has taken place in the DRC. What's the process thereafter? Once the final results are in, how is the DRC's current president going to step down and the new president, an incumbent president, then taking over?
Well, a month after the elections, technically, according to the program that SENI has outlined, there should be, the president-elect should be inaugurated. And this will be the first time that we will be having a sitting president stepping down and handing over the keys of the State House to an incoming president-elect. So in January, should be mid-January, most probably, I think 15th of January, there will be official inauguration and swearing in of whoever will be emerging victorious from the polls, and President Kabila will officially be handing over and starting his life after State House.
Aime, thank you so much for joining us. We'll leave it there for now. That is Aime Zonveni, the editor of the Kinshasa Times, an online newsletter in the DRC, joining us via Skype.